Welcome back to the Manic Manor podcast. I'm your host, Mitchie, and tonight we return to the Smoky Mountains, a place of beauty, mystery, and silent sorrow. 56 years ago, a 6-year-old boy named Dennis Martin vanished while on a family camping trip. Despite the largest search efforts in national park history, he was never found. And tonight, we will tell his story. We begin our story with Dennis Lloyd Martin, who was born June 20th, 1962, in Knoxville, Tennessee. An adventurous, outgoing child with a slight developmental delay, he was well-behaved and never wandered too far away from his family. On June 13th, 1969, Dennis joined his father William, grandfather Clyde, and older brother Douglas for their annual Father's Day camping trip in the Great Smoky Mountain National Park. They planned to hike the Appalachian Trail, including areas like the Boat Mountain Trail, Russell Field, and Rowan's Creek. Now, Spence Field is a high-elevation grassy bald on the Tennessee-North Carolina border, about 4,900 feet up, known for its views and extensive wildlife. Now, the first day went extremely smoothly for the family. The Martins, they met some friends along the trail, and decided to camp overnight at Russell Field, planning to continue their journey in the next morning. But now we get into day 2. It's June 14th, 1969, and in the group of friends that the father and grandfather had made, there was some other boys around the age of Dennis and his brother in the group. Now, these boys wanted to play a little prank on their father and their grandfather and all the other adults. So, as they're enjoying the view, the adults are, the boys run off, and little Dennis decides to go into the woods. Now, like I said, it's known that Dennis did have a slight developmental delay and was an adventurous and outgoing child, but he was still a very well-behaved child and not known to wander off haphazardly from his family. The plan was to hide within the sight of the line of trees and do a little jump scare on the parents. And when the boys did it, it worked. But something wasn't right. They come to realize that Dennis did not jump out of the trees, and he was nowhere in sight. William started to scream and search for Dennis, calling his name out, hoping that the little boy had maybe just wandered a little bit too far out of ear and eye shot. However, he would return to the field without his son and completely terrified. Now, the grandfather Clyde would hike up to the ranger station, which was near Cades Cove and 9 miles away from where they were, just to notify them of his missing grandchild. The ranger then notified the superiors that a child was missing in the area. Now, while backup was being recruited, the ranger, along with the Martin family and the friends that they made, would begin to search the nearby trails for young Dennis. And eventually, rain would move into the area during nightfall, making any search efforts impossible. Trails would be washed out, scents would be removed, as well as any potential footprints that little Dennis could have left. They would resume the search the following day, June 15th, with the National Park Service putting together a crew of 30 volunteers, and eventually it would add up, soon making it around 240 people that joined the search. Within this search party were people ranging from just regular everyday civilians, like college students, to professionals like the rangers themselves and firefighters. They even had Boy Scouts and 60 Green Berets who had joined them in this search for young Dennis. This would wind up being one of the largest search efforts in the history of the National Park Service. Now, they set up base camp at Spence Field where everyone had gathered to get and provide information as they progressed in this search. The FBI released an extensive report from their vault back around 2023, announcing that eventually thousands of people would be joining in the efforts to locate young Dennis, including Army units and Air Force helicopters in this group. At the peak, they said that ground traffickers reached about 1,400 people. The FBI noted that where Dennis got separated was a dense wilderness area that, unless Dennis had vocally cried out to people for help, people could easily have walked right by him and never even knew that he was right beside or in front of them. This wouldn't help the fact that many of the volunteers that were trying to help in this search did not have experience with tracking whatsoever. So it caused the search to be extremely slowed down and littered and patterned with confusion. Now, these people meant extremely well in their efforts and wanted to help, and the sheer amount of people who had come to this area with their well intentions littered the area with their tracks, and it did not help in the issue with finding young Dennis. Now, around the 17th of June, they did locate some tracks that people thought, or hoped at least, would be that belonging to Dennis. There was a shoe type imprint that was around the same size shoe that Dennis wore the day that he vanished, and it was also the same brand of shoe, an Oxford shoe. Roughly the same size. They also discovered that they could only see one shoe imprint, which meant they thought Dennis possibly had lost his other shoe. Now, I mentioned the FBI had released reports. They did not fully get involved until the following 18th day of June to help in this search. However, weeks would go by without a single trace, and by the 29th, they were left scratching their heads on what would be the next steps. William was extremely desperate to find his little boy. He even turned to psychics in the area at one point, although they didn't give any clear-cut answers. The Martin family offered a $5,000 reward for any information regarding their son as the search and rescue efforts started to wind down due to a complete lack of evidence. They kept some special rangers in the area to conduct small searches until September, and by the end of it, 13,000 man-hours and 200 flight hours had gone into the search for the missing Dennis. As for the $5,000 offer that the family had made, with such an outstanding offer of money at that time, like 1969, in today's currency, that would have been close to about $44,000. You know, people flooded the phone lines with all sorts of stories. Some might have had credible witnesses to it, but others were just simply trying to get the money. There were also other leads, like reports from people who had claimed to see or hear Dennis while they had been camping in the area as well. In July 21st of 1969, a man named Harold had claimed to hear a scream while on a trip with his family in the Smokies, the same day that Dennis went missing. They'd been in an area called Sea Branch, which was near Rowan's Creek. In this story, he said that his son had claimed to see a bear as they were traveling along a trail. But he thought that it wasn't a bear, it was a man hiding in the bushes, and this man was definitely avoiding them. He didn't think much about it until he heard about the disappearance of Dennis, to which he came forward with his story. And he showed them the location, but officials doubted the plausibility of it being Dennis that they heard screaming due to the distance between Spencefield and Sea Branch being roughly about 6 or 7 miles. Another note is that Dennis had disappeared around the time of 4 to 4:30 in the afternoon. Harold couldn't give an exact time that he saw this man and that there was a scream heard, but he assumed that he saw the man between 4 and 5 p.m. Now, if he was to walk about 7 miles, maybe it was probable, depending on how quick and how healthy this guy was, but a lot of people doubted it. This lead would fall cold to officials, but not to William, who took any kind of evidence brought forth with the utmost importance. He was doing anything he could to locate his son. He believed, through all of this, that Dennis was kidnapped and was angry that he did not get notified of this sighting and only found out through the newspaper. Now, he would eventually speak to Harold, but nothing came of it. They did hike the area between Spence and Sea Branch and found that they could have done it within about 90 minutes, but they had nothing on the trail that they were hiking showing any evidence or trace of Dennis. Then again, this was around July, August, so any evidence could have easily had been wiped away. Now, William struggled for years trying to figure out what happened to his boy, and at one point had stopped doing any and all interviews after the media consistently pestered him and being dismissed by the local authorities. Family members of the Martins said that the family never truly was the same after the disappearance of Dennis, and William didn't go back to work for a long time. If you go on to Reddit threads, of course you're going to hear all sorts of conspiracy theories of wild men in the Appalachian Mountains. In my opinion, don't really believe that shit. I live in this area, and while you're going to see a couple of vagrants here and there, we don't actually deal with quote-unquote wild men, like so many people love to claim on Reddit and TikTok and the stories that you hear on YouTube. Usually they're just homeless people, and it's no different than a person anywhere else in the United States or anywhere else in the world for that matter. Some people went as far as to say and claim that William potentially harmed his own child and made up the camping trip as a ruse. Now, considering that there was other people around, I don't find that a very plausible explanation as well. But people are going to come up with all sorts of ideas. 56 years later, and all the theories in the world have not found this missing boy. One thing that did come from the search of Dennis was it changed protocol that showed that you could not have all these volunteers just coming out of the woodwork as they did because of the damage it did to all the clues that they could have potentially found and led to the discovery of this boy. Now, I'll finish you off with this. At the time of Dennis's disappearance, he had been about 4 foot tall and weighed 55 pounds and had dark brown eyes and wavy brown hair. He was wearing a red shirt and Oxford shoes, as we mentioned before. If he was still alive today, he would be 63 years old, and I will attach a picture of what they anticipate he looks like now from the Missing Persons website on the YouTube version and put it on my Instagram and Facebook as well. And so I thank you for walking into the fog with me tonight. And I know this story could be very haunting and very disturbing for some people, but I do appreciate you listening to it. So let's help keep Dennis's memory alive and hopefully put an end to his disappearance case. Until the next time, remember, the woods will remember everything. I'll see you in the next video. Good night.